EP28, Episode 28, Chapter 32, Losing It on East 66th Street. Hello, social media mites and mavens. James Homan here. I was encouraged to include this chapter as initial readers were concerned that my efforts were being presented as a bit too heroic. They wanted to know there were dents in my armor. Indeed, no one is perfect. Perfection is an unattainable goal, which is why the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi exists. Presented here is simply one of my dents. Please remember that 1. I had not enjoyed physical relations with anyone for over a year. 2. I was now 50 years of age. And 3. I hadn't undressed in front of a sexual partner in more than 15 years. In retrospect, perhaps all dents require courage. Dents imply change, and this might be the obvious indication that caring for myself became more important in my life. That's your call. Losing It on East 66th Street. Mr. Bear lapsed into a coma at the end of the first week in May. He had closed his eyes on April 30th, and they never reopened. We had now entered our final phase. How long would it be? Weeks or months? None of the doctors seemed certain. Waiting was a different sort of anxiety. There was no action to take. Nightly, before going to bed during this coma, he had requested I read to him The House at Pooh Corner. It had been his favorite book from childhood. I would sit next to his hospital bed and read a chapter, or as much as I could get through before my eyes would be clouded with tears. Could he actually hear me? What was he thinking? Where was he between this physical plane and the next? Was Tramp actually waiting for him at the Rainbow Bridge? This was now the final leg of our journey, and I felt I was walking it alone. My relationship with Harold lasted for 1 month short of what would have been our 15th anniversary. Like all love, ours was a kind of sustenance. We shared our love with each other, with our dear pets, with our dearest friends, family, and never strayed. We were monogamous and HIV negative, and sex was almost daily, mostly at night and mostly at home, until that eventful April Fool's Day in 1998. I cheated on him once, and only once. And this is the story. One Wednesday evening, after walking Beanie, after reading a Pooh chapter and realizing that I had only 3 more chapters to read aloud, and then updating all 88 email addresses that composed our tree of contacts, I logged on to an AOL chat room entitled Men for Men. A friend of Harold's had made me aware of this newly discovered social media way of meeting people. For me, it became an enticing exercise, a bit of a release while I waited. Come on, I was living vicariously. Very unexpectedly, a gentleman sent me an instant message asking where I lived and what I was doing. I typed and sent this response. I live on West 72nd Street and I'm masturbating. Well, I live across Central Park on East 66th Street. Why don't you let me help you? Come on over, he responded, providing me an address between 5th and Madison. I thought that explaining my lover was dying in bed in the same room where I was having this verbal tryst would end this correspondence. Instead, his next message indicated instructions to the entrance of his ground floor apartment, as well as his personal info. Gay white male, almost 6 feet tall, bearded, early 50s, with the love of classical music and opera. Wow, so curiously similar to Harold. This was getting interesting. But due to the circumstances, I remained reluctant. Do I go? Is this a betrayal? I didn't know what to do. His next message included his phone number, which I called. In retrospect, I wondered what allows us to do such things. The sound of this mystery man's deep voice excited me. His instructions were precise. After tucking Harold in and explaining that I would be gone for a brief time, I grabbed a cab outside our apartment building at 12:45 a.m. Shortly afterwards, I found myself standing outside my destination on East 66th Street, wondering what the hell was I doing? I hadn't been with another person in over 15 years. I'd recently turned 51, was the primary caregiver. I was the primary caregiver to my dying lover and hadn't had sex in 14 months. Nervous excitement was something I'd experienced at every audition. One simply had to focus that energy to get through the experience. So I focused and stepped through this looking glass located east of Fifth Avenue. I mean, there are worse addresses at which my body could have been found. Without explicit details, let me simply say that this adventure turned into one of the briefest, most erotic, darker shades of gray sex I ever experienced. The mutual actions having been exhilaratingly accomplished, I stepped back outside and hailed a cab going up Madison Avenue. I was feeling so confused. I wept quietly as possible most of the way home. I arrived home at 1:15 a.m. Nothing had changed, but I felt guilty. It was a relatively small guilt in comparison to the big picture. I realized that nothing I had done over the last 14 months, regardless of how exhausting, goal-directed, and or challenging the effort, was going to change the ending of this ballad. In what seemed the most perfect accomplishment of my life, a mutual loving and beneficial long-term relationship, I proved I was imperfect, realizing for humans, perfection is not an attainable goal. I want to think Harold understood my physical needs and therefore also understood this one indiscretion, perhaps better than I did. Harold died the following Sunday. And that concludes this podcast. Please check in next week for episode 29 as we indeed slide into home and beyond. As always, thank you for your time and interest. Until next week, then, be kind, do good, be happy, and love one another, remembering to coexist with tolerance while embracing similarities and respecting differences. Thank you.